Welcome to The Next Stage, the podcast where we turn up the house lights on the future of venue management. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, this is your go-to source for the latest trends, innovations, and best practices in the venue and event management industry.
The amount of information and the amount of change and the amount of opportunity has never been greater.
We've literally broken down walls and we're looking at how can we create a more seamless experience.
There's customer demand for sustainability now.
On the forefront when it comes to venues that might not look like what you think of as a venue today.
Welcome back to The Next Stage. I'm your host, VMA CEO Joel Edmondson, and with me today is the wonderful Michael Roberts, Associate Resilience, Risk and Security from Arup. How are you, Michael?
Very well, thanks, Joel.
Great to have you. Yeah, I'm good, mate. Great to have you with us today.
Good to be here.
I always like to start off, learning more about you as a person and your background so that our listeners get a sense of where you're coming from in our discussion today. What led you to this field?
For me, working in the major events and security and venues industry probably goes back to actually growing up in Canberra and being around my family, my parents who were all over sports and getting involved in community activities and all sorts of activities from local community events all the way through to heading up down the road to Sydney to the SCG to watch the cricket. And there's some of my earliest and best experiences. So, the incredible sense of anticipation as you're heading towards a venue before a big event like a one-day nighter at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and then experiencing that crowd and that wild experience inside the venue was just fantastic as a young person. The flip side of that, however, and I do have very clear memories of experiencing challenging behaviour during those times as well. And coming from Canberra, going up to the Big Smoke in Sydney, seeing and feeling things around venues in terms of intoxication and bad behaviour. While some of it was fun, some of it was quite confronting as well when you're seeing fistfights outside of venues and those sorts of things. So that really stuck with me. And I think from those earliest days, the passion of being involved in those events was in me, but also the understanding of what can go wrong. And throughout my career, I've sort of lent towards public safety and security roles, working with the federal government, firstly, for about 10 years in a bunch of different jobs, including my first major event experience in the Commonwealth Games down in Melbourne in 2006, which was awesome, working on transport security at that time. And then shifting really into this space in sort of early 2010s, moving over to Qatar and working on the World Cup there. So working on design of venues and stadiums for a major event was a fantastic experience. And then taking the opportunity to head over to France and work at Interpol as well in major event safety and security and setting up a program there to build capabilities around the world for major event safety and security delivery. And that, I think, for me, inspired me a bit to get into this giving back side of things as well, and understanding that the experiences and things that I've done can potentially benefit others. And we'll hopefully talk a bit about that later on as we get to a discussion around the Institute of Venue Safety and Security. I was then able to shift back to Oz, work at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, one of the most iconic venues in the world. And that was a brilliant experience supporting major events, driving the safety and security strategy there for the organisation, and also the COVID response, which was really challenging down in Victoria, obviously. And then shifting to consulting over the last several years, working with Arup. So in that role, we've supported a bunch of venues in their safety and security planning, as well as sort of more general operations planning, design work, and specifically as head of security for the Australian Olympic Committee. So that was supporting the team over in Paris at the Olympics last year, which was an amazing personal experience and great as well from an organisational perspective.
So that's a huge and exciting career resume. Going back to the origins of your experience in venues, obviously things like violence was a lot more normalised in public in society in those days. And I imagine without the technology and the expertise that we have now, more difficult to manage. What are the things that really jump out at you that have changed over those decades of working in this field?
I think a really significant change has been the focus of security efforts. So in the past, I think many of these events and venues sort of took a securitized approach to this. So relying on law enforcement, for example, to wield the big stick when things started getting out of hand, rather than flipping it on its head and saying, well, actually, if we create a fantastic experience for people that is encouraging of positive behaviours and experiences, that supports people to have fun and also discourages people from doing the wrong thing, then you're going to get a better outcome through that sort of approach. And that's understanding that security quite often can be the first and maybe only interaction in the days of digital ticketing and those sorts of things, that that's the first and only interaction that maybe someone coming to your venue has with someone from your venue. So that has to be a fantastic customer experience as much as delivering a security outcome or a safety outcome. So that's been a big shift. I think, as you mentioned, the technology side has really changed so much. The development of video surveillance and analytics has gone through the roof. Security screening technologies, which support not only, again, achieving a better security outcome, but also delivering incredible customer experiences, have come so far. So there's some of the key areas, I guess, that have demonstrated the need to take a different perspective to how we do this and see this as an enabler of incredible experiences rather than something that maybe puts a brake on people having a good time at our venues.
So in that respect, often your part of the sector is perceived as the sort of negative would be the wrong way to say it, but certainly like threat and risk focused. But obviously you've just touched on a way that safety and security can enhance the experience of people in patrons. Have you got any other thoughts on that? Yeah,
definitely. I think some of the things that we're seeing, particularly in the US at the moment, and increasingly in Australia as well, around frictionless entry. So the idea of people opting in to use a biometric such as their face as their credential to get access to a venue, linking that sort of system with a security screening technology that requires minimal intervention by a security officer, so people can walk generally freely through the screening technology without being stopped, and they won't be stopped unless there's some sort of item that needs to be investigated further. Then linking that through to the analytics capabilities of that technology to potentially have a concierge type arrangement, entering via a red carpet, seamless entry, face as a credential, seamless screening process, greeted by someone who maybe knows your name because they've been notified who you are. They know the coffee or beer that you drank the last time you arrived. They direct you to your preferred bar as evidenced by the analytics within the system and tell you and ask you if you'd like to have that preferred beverage or food item or whatever it may be ready for them when they get there. So that's almost happening now in the US, and there are elements of that being implemented now in Australian venues and around the region. So there's incredible opportunity there to really leverage that technology to enhance experience. And to your point, taking this away, supporting the risk management side of it and delivering the safety and security outcome that's required, but also being able to take a more nuanced approach to that. So if you've got someone who's obviously coming to your venue every year, they've been a 20-year member or corporate partner, they're happy to share a biometric credential to get access to the venue. These technologies from a screening perspective can be ramped up and down in terms of their sensitivity settings. So if you have a patron like that and they have provided all this information, you can make a risk-based decision on whether or not you decide to maybe reduce the sensitivity settings to make that screening experience even more seamless for that individual, potentially incorporating some elements of randomness into the process just in case there are those individuals who sort of maybe go off the rails a little bit in between the time they've been assessed as lower risk.
And for those listeners who don't fully understand the context, you said then that in the US, really facial recognition technology is a long way ahead in terms of its implementation. Might be helpful to explain to listeners why in Australia that hasn't accelerated at the same pace.
Yeah, for sure. I think something in Australia that we seem to have a greater focus on, or a different focus on, is the privacy elements of these biometric technologies, in particular facial recognition. There have been the high-profile cases of Bunnings and department stores utilising facial recognition technology for the purpose of preventing crime and keeping banned persons out of their shopping retail outlets or Bunnings warehouses. So the Privacy Commissioner has made rulings that in some cases the use of that technology for those purposes has been not necessarily up to scratch from a privacy perspective. So that's a real discussion that we need to continue having here. I think there are grounds on public safety within privacy legislation that allow the deployment of these types of technology. It's demonstrating, I think, that when they are deployed in a large public event, such as a stadium or a conference centre or a theatre or whatever it might be, that there are sufficient privacy protocols in place to ensure that even if it's only being used for people who've opted in the case of a customer service experience, that anyone else being captured, their faces being captured by that device, not being stored, they're not being captured, they're not being saved, and they're not identifiable to that individual who's been captured via the video surveillance device. The other element of it is using it in wide surveillance, where you're using it to identify people who may be banned and prevented from a venue, for example. In those cases, it is scanning a wide range of people, not necessarily focused on the access points. So again, demonstrating the privacy applications that are in place to prevent storage of privacy information, personally identifiable information that doesn't need to be stored because that individual is not someone of concern to that venue and hasn't been banned, for example.
And
so there's some of the challenges.
Yeah, and this is part of a broader trust context where there's endless data breaches going on that are reported, seemingly on a weekly basis. And that's obviously a global issue, but there's other global issues in the zeitgeist, I suppose, about, the geopolitical landscape and tech evolution, patron behavior itself. How's this bigger picture reshaping the risk profile for venues?
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how evolving geopolitical issues and the security context around the world are impacting on venues directly. Even things like performers protesting at theatres based on global events occurring, for example, in the Middle East, unfurling flags of certain nations or causes during performances is one example where that challenges venues to understand how they're going to approach things like, their prohibited items list for their patrons, but how does that apply to performers and how does that differ compared to the art sector and the sporting sector, for example, in a major event context where, for example, at a soccer World Cup or a football World Cup, FIFA have very strict rules around displays of political statements on the field of play by the athletes themselves. So it has to be contextualised, I guess, in terms of how organisations and venues are going to respond to those sorts of issues. I think the key here is that it's not going to get easier. Things like cyber threats will continue. They're going to get more challenging as we progress, and what venues and event owners and concert promoters and others need to be aware of is that they need to have proactive approach to managing their risks. So being very, not taking a one-size-fits-all approach to all of their events, understanding the particular potential issues that may be associated with hosting, for example, a sporting team at a particular stadium and any controversies or risks associated with that team. Also understanding the cyber threat environment, being clear in terms of how those threats are evolving and what they need to do to understand how the operational elements of what they do, which venue managers generally do understand very well, how they can create vulnerabilities in the cyberspace, and likewise how how vulnerabilities in technology can impact on their ability to deliver a fantastic event. So that's a really key element, I think, as we move forward for those involved in and responsible for cybersecurity at venues and for events, to work closely with those on the operational side to understand where those linkages are and take a more holistic approach to safety and security and event delivery and operations.
And the subtext of what you're talking about there is that there's a convergence of the physical and digital worlds now. You know, venue managers, in a sense, are looking after events that are, you know, happening in the built form of their infrastructure, but also there's this digital space in which the event is happening as well. How do we respond strategically as venues to that convergence?
I think at the highest level, there needs to be better integration between, as I mentioned, those teams responsible for cybersecurity and those responsible for physical security and event operations. So in other industries, such as banking and finance and the resources sector, what we're seeing as a trend is actually the chief security officer being responsible for both cybersecurity and physical security elements, in the appreciation that they are intrinsically linked now, and vulnerabilities in each area will impact on each other. And to be frank, the principles, well, when you get down to the technical level of cybersecurity, it can become reasonably impenetrable to the layman. The principles and approaches at the highest level for delivering cybersecurity are very similar to the physical world and the physical space. So the idea of risk management, the idea of having governance and clear roles and responsibilities for delivering different elements of your security system, understanding your vulnerabilities and your potential impacts from successful attacks, whether in the physical or cybersecurity space, identifying mitigation measures, who's going to be responsible for implementing those measures, and then actually having a plan to implement them and track how well you're performing and allocating budgets and all those sorts of things. So I think, you know, there is a strong argument for that more holistic approach, where even at a venue level, that person, that individual, that team responsible for physical security or cybersecurity could have responsibility for the other as well. And I think the other element of that is there's a responsibility on the cybersecurity teams to make cybersecurity less impenetrable. And really, so many vulnerabilities in cybersecurity are driven by the human factor and relying on people doing the right thing, not pressing on phishing email links and creating vulnerabilities through the systems that they use. That's an imperative on cybersecurity teams to make the language easier to understand and communicate more effectively what needs to be done here, all the way down to the layman and all the way up to the board level. And then on the physical security side, I think we can have a tendency, and that's probably more my space, to dismiss cybersecurity because of the technical nature of it and the fact that it's too hard and it's for those guys over there, the cybersecurity or the IT team, to sort out. But we need to commit ourselves to understand it more and work together with those teams to deliver a holistic approach to security at our venues.
And one of the key human elements here, perhaps the key human element, is actually getting people in the first place to be able to work in these different roles. Looking ahead, we've got some pretty big events coming to Australia. I mean, we've got the British and Irish Lions tour here at the moment, but we've got a thing called the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2032 that you need a fair few people to successfully pull off an event like that.
Yeah.
There's competition for labour across every sector of the Australian economy. What are we going to do to fill the growing demand in the safety and security space?
I'd start off by saying that I think the venue management teams in Australia are some of the best in the world from what I've seen. And so we've got this really wonderful base to build from, whether it's in Queensland with the teams up there delivering fantastic events every week for their venues and for their state or other states and territories. Having said that, there's all of those individuals have jobs to do now. So unless they all do want to relocate to Queensland to support an incredible event that the Brisbane 2032 Games will be, then they're not necessarily going to be able to draw on those resources, although there may be options, on a short-term basis to get some of those really, really crucial event operations type people up there to support those activities as the event nears. So I think the benefit of an event like Brisbane 2032 is it's such a, as you alluded to, really prestigious and incredible event. It's one that can be a career highlight type experience, something that is a once in a lifetime opportunity to have this in your backyard to deliver. So that will naturally attract people to a lot of those roles. I think it will be really important to focus on the middle management side of things. And, the events industry and venues industry generally is quite attractive, I sense, to people to get involved in. It's exciting from an operational perspective. You get to be around big events and concerts and theatre or arts and culture or whatever you're into and experience that day to day and be part of contributing something that really makes a lot of people happy every day, which is awesome. So I think that's another inherent element that we need to tap into and sell the fact that leading up to Brisbane 2032, we build a base of talent that's coming through and recruit them into our venues and our industry, but then they need to be supported and skilled up and prepared to be able to fulfil these roles, including in terms of safety and security. So that's where training and development will be crucial. Getting people involved in things like the Institute of Venue Safety and Security with the Venue Management Association will be absolutely vital, and building that bench strength, because really from my perspective, those middle management supervisor type roles are those that will be the crucial link between organisational or event strategy when it comes to Brisbane 2032 and the Games, all the way through to operational delivery on the ground during the event itself. So starting to build that cohort now, bringing those key players into the industry, identifying the talent, preparing them through training and development, but also operational experiences on the job to then be ready to step into those key roles come 2032. I think there's a huge challenge as well around the private security sector. I don't think a major event globally or an Olympic Games in particular has necessarily solved this yet post I guess September 11, where security requirements have really gone through the roof. So having a flexible and adaptable approach to engaging private security that delivers what's required from a Games perspective, but also understands that there's a limited pool of resources there to draw on for that sort of support as well, and looking at technology opportunities to reduce the reliance on manpower as well will be really crucial.
But where that manpower quality can be enhanced, you almost gave me a direct segue, but I'll pull back to something you said before as an opportunity to talk about education. And the VMA offers a 2-year residential security program called the Institute of Venue Safety and Security, and you just happen to be the incoming chair as Wayne Middleton finishes up this year. Do you want to talk a little bit about your vision for the school and what it can do for the future of the workforce in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would like to see for the IVSS over the next several years is continuing to grow on the really incredible foundation that we have. The wonderful elements of the IVSS are the behind-the-scenes access that students get to venues that they may otherwise not get access to. That includes the key managers in those venues from operation through to safety and security, the quality of the instructors, both domestically and internationally, that directly immersed in the instructor program and participate actively throughout the course delivery every year, and then the subsequent follow-up, through town halls. And it's not a one-off thing. You don't create this incredible network with your students, your participants, those participants who you go through the course with, as well as the instructors. You get to meet with them on a regular basis post the school and or the institute training session and continue to engage, and that's so valuable. So my vision for that is to continue growing on that base. I'd like to see it expanded to the region so we get more regional engagement. across Asia, across the Pacific, and of course Australia, to build relationships and that network across the region. That can be a key source of support as well for this major event pipeline that Australia has, bringing in skilled and experienced people from around the region to support safety and security efforts, venue operations, all the other things that need to be delivered to deliver these major events. So that's really important. Making those connections with our regional colleagues in key centres. Singapore Sports Hub is a fantastic example of that, where they've got very similar challenges in many ways, running similar events as we do in Australia and New Zealand. Good experience around delivering those events, and I'm sure they've got a lot to offer, not only from a student participant perspective for the IVSS, but also as instructors as well, and bringing a broader understanding of major event delivery to it also. I'd like to continue bringing in examples of good practice and opportunities for improvement from around the world. I think we can build the Institute of Venue Safety and Security, particularly now through, as it's a two-year course and into the second year, build the understanding and capabilities for people to work within that major event environment. So really sharing information about how an Olympic Games is planned and delivered, how a FIFA World Cup is planned and delivered, and what that means, again, not only for the sporting venues, but the venues across a Games footprint to deliver an event like that, and really continuing to build on that understanding of the core work that happens in year one around crowd management, around risk management, understanding regulatory requirements. How do we mitigate a range of security threats and deal with a range of safety hazards, and then start to really focus on that. Okay, how do we do this at scale, and how do we do this for an event that is potentially across multiple venues and different types of venues, from competition venues to non-competition venues, is really important to understand the complexity of that and the systems and approaches and processes that go into delivering an event like that. And then linked to that is an understanding of, I guess, those global, I'm not sure if they're regulatory requirements, but requirements of organisations that are bringing events like these to our shores. So that's really crucial as well. So yeah, that's where I'd like to take it, I think.
And I guess to add to that, the thing that I would like to see happen, and I guess I've got a pretty strong hand in influencing it as the CEO of the company, is that as much as we want to expand regionally and globally in terms of our own industry, I also think our industry sometimes can be a little insular, and there is a whole world out there of expertise that we can learn from. We are special and different, and then we're not special and different. And I think there's an opportunity for us to open our minds to a whole other world that's out there. Can you think of any examples of other industries that are doing really well in the safety and security space that we could learn from?
Yeah, I think it's a different environment, but I think there are similarities between this industry and aviation. So, there's such a focus on customer experience in aviation, and the challenge they've got is that so many of their security approaches are mandated by regulatory requirements. So they don't have as much flexibility and adaptability as we do in the venues industry to adapt our security approaches to incorporate customer experience elements. So I think looking to the aviation sector on the technology side as well, they're probably a bit more advanced in terms of deployment of technology to support security operations, not only from a security operational perspective, but also from an event operations or venue operations perspective also. And I'm thinking there about data analytics to identify potential threat items and respond to incidents efficiently and all those sorts of things. So also looking at crowd modelling to facilitate movement of patrons through a terminal, for example, which is useful in the stadium environment as well, but also to model evacuation routes and those sorts of things. So I think aviation's really interesting. I think from a more commercial perspective, I think we and the retail sector in terms of major shopping centres and those sorts of facilities can can learn from each other. We're starting to see again that contactless purchasing process in stadiums, particularly in the US, and I've seen Allianz Stadium recently using seamless payment options for the Lions tour recently. So understanding how they can improve facilitation, but also safety and security of venues as well, I think is really interesting. And then from an overall security management perspective, those industries I mentioned earlier, which are really finance, banking and finance, and resources in terms of how they're taking a more holistic approach to security. I think integrating the cyber and physical worlds to deliver a holistic approach to security for their organisations is something we can learn from also.
I can definitely envisage a future where you can transport essentially the model of security entry in an airport and put it in a major venue where there's that level of kind of bag checking through an X-ray going on. And obviously, that would create huge issues from a sort of entry and exit perspective on, how quickly you can get people through the gates. But I don't think it'll be long before, as everyone in our industry knows, some other kind of terrorist attack on a venue in Australia is inevitable at some point. There's an inevitability to that, and that's what we really need to prepare for. But there's also other factors here that are non-technological in the security industry that impact the quality of security at venues, and in many ways it's about kind of the culture and the commercial and economic culture of the security industry in Australia, and how that then manifests in the quality of service that a venue gets from a supplier in this space. Can you talk a little bit about some of the factors that impact that quality endpoint at the venue?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen many cases of the security guard being engaged via WhatsApp, for example, and being paid cash and not being paid award rates, and being brought into a venue, including big venues, on that sort of basis, which then calls into question their understanding of the venue, of the environment they're working in, the level of training and capability, and potentially even licensing that they have, the understanding of the customer service objectives of the venue and the client. And the fact that, if something goes wrong, are you able to actually rely on them to respond as effectively as they should? So that then lends itself to the question of, well, actually, how much are we investing in this resource? And it's so critical, as I said before, from a customer experience perspective, maybe the first and only customer experience interaction that someone has when they come to your venue. But also from a security perspective, they may be the first and last line of defence in many cases to prevent something bad happening. So I'd encourage venues to consider, are they really looking for the lowest common denominator, and that's the financial benefit from engaging a cheaper service provider who maybe doesn't tick all the boxes, or are they investing in appropriate levels of training for their private security workforce? That means you might have to pay a little bit more, ensuring that you're auditing those companies to make sure they're doing everything they should be from a workplace relations perspective and payment perspective and training and capability development perspective. Are you thinking about any additional training that they need to actually work in your venue and deliver the level of customer service and experience and safety and security that you require for them? And in particular, going back to that earlier discussion around the Olympics, are you investing at the right level? So the supervisor level is so crucial, again, for your private security workforce. They will be the ones who are there at every event, every match at a stadium, or every concert at a concert venue, or every play that's put on at a theatre venue. So, and they will drive the standards for you at that level, linking what you want to achieve at your venue with the people on the ground actually doing the work. So ensuring that you're investing sufficiently to get good quality supervisory staff, make sure that they're there regularly at your venue, if not every event, and supporting them to do their job really well, because they'll be really, really crucial to what you do. So I think it really is, it comes down to the venue itself and what it wants to achieve, and how much priority it puts on ensuring a safe and secure outcome, but also delivering great customer experience through those resources.
Michael, thanks so much for being with us today. There's one more question I'd like to ask you. What's the most common thing that you think can be improved across venues in terms of your experience looking at this issue as deeply as you have? What's the one thing that could be catalytic for greater improvement if we just did it a little bit better?
That's a really good question. I think the thing that immediately pops into my mind is the issue of the private security workforce, just as we've been talking about that there, and having a different approach to engagement, training, and management of those teams. They're so important for us. I think something that we do really well as an industry is sharing information and collaboration. I think at the venue level, ensuring that that collaboration is as good as it could be across all of the stakeholders that venues are working with, and that includes the government stakeholders we work with through law enforcement, public safety, ambulance, fire, etc. The promoters that bring events to our venues, and sporting organisations that deliver events on a regular basis at some of the bigger venues. And then the venue delivery organisations, so whether they're directly engaged by the venue or they're contracted in, ensuring effective integration across all of those, and communication, collaboration across all of those stakeholders, I think could have a huge improvement. It's done really well at some venues, but I think the busyness of just delivering events means that there's not necessarily always enough time to do that pre-work, that planning, that collaboration, the exercising and testing together of safety and security arrangements and emergency response arrangements. There's not always the time because you're so busy delivering, but the benefits of doing that are so valuable, and I'd encourage everyone to think about how well they're sort of collaborating and planning with the various stakeholders that they have to work with.
That is a great way of wrapping things up. And certainly if you are interested in learning more about a lot of what Michael said today, the Institute of Venue Safety and Security is a great way of engaging in that process of learning and building your professional network in this space. If you want to learn more about it or anything about the VMA, please go to vma.org.au. Otherwise, Michael, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks very much, Joel. It was a pleasure.
Great. And we'll see you all next time on the next stage.